I'd like to announce that I have received my first dividend payment. What's up, all my stock market investors? It's Shpena, and I'm back again with another Cash App investing video. And before we get started, I want to announce that I have received my first dividend payment from Viacom CBS. So let's give them a round of applause. Shout out to Viacom CBS. And even though my stock is down way over 50%, I still received a dividend payment for the money I have invested in Viacom. So maybe I might or should attack more dividend stocks. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comments if I should be attacking more dividend stocks or just focus on where the growth is. Let me know in the comments below, and make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video because it puts a beautiful smile on my face, right? So let's get into the battle of the companies today. And I want to go into the airline industry because I feel like the airline industry has been slammed. And I think that the airline industry is going to do a nice rebound, later down the road, because traveling is fun and millennials love to travel. Everybody loves to travel. And for many of us, we're saving money right now, so maybe we'll be spending and splurging that money on nice travel. And I honestly feel like there will be more domestic travel than anything going forward in the future. But, time will tell, right? Two companies we're comparing today are JetBlue and Delta. Delta's more of a big guy. JetBlue is kind of just a big guy. I don't want to call JetBlue a small guy because they have a pretty decent sized market cap. But Delta has more what you would call global focus. They have a lot more invested in other airplane brands around the globe. They have tons of percentages in equity in brands around the globe, which could come to bite them in the you-know-what if things continue to go bad. Now, JetBlue has a more domestic focused. And although they did they were trying to attack some business strategy, business travelers, they still have a domestic focus here in the United States, which is very good. The JetBlue stock is currently trading at $7 as I make this video, and the Delta stock is currently trading around $22 as I make this video. And some things to note in why there's such a big difference is because they're both down as far as how much they were before in this year or last quarter. It's literally solely that Delta is just a big boy, right? It's a big boy, and JetBlue's kind of like a grown little boy, I guess. Grown little boy versus a big boy. That's why there's such a big gap in their price per share. Now, JetBlue does not pay a dividend, which is not the greatest. But Delta pays a dividend, not the highest. I think it's around like 35 cents per share, which it's not bad. It's not bad to earn money while you're investing your money. That's actually good. Now that I think about it, it's probably best to have a dividend stock than to not have a dividend stock, unless you see crazy growth or you can, kind of point out any great things, right? Aside from that, the airline industry is going to go into this, what you call a shrink mode, and some have already started doing it. I know Spirit Airlines have taken their complete flights out of airports, like they're not flying at all. I know JetBlue's chomped down by like 40-50%. American Airlines is going to like 60% from April to May. So everybody's going into this whole shrink mode, which is going to pretty much be putting their flights, their airplanes on the sidelines. And Delta is extremely well positioned for this. And the reason why is because they have the oldest fleet of airplanes on the market. Their strategy is literally to fly older planes, just do more routine maintenance. So they probably got a handful of planes that should have been, put to bed, that they're probably going to put to bed this year, which it doesn't really hurt them. They've gotten the most out of all their planes. So they're in like kind of the best position as far as this whole shrink thing. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to come out of this clean slated, all good and everything, because we don't even know how long this is going to last, right? But as far as when it comes to shrinkage, Delta is in a good position for that. And JetBlue, they're not in a bad position because they don't have any 737 Maxes that they're sitting on waiting to take off. Now, for those of you who don't know, the 737 Max had an issue where they had some type of software where they would tip the plane down, but they didn't let the pilots know how to fly the plane. So in that event, a handful of planes went down, sidelining anybody who was trying to put a 737 Max on the runway, which is probably a handful of the bigwigs like American Airlines and a handful of others. But JetBlue didn't get into the 737 Max, so they can shrink and still not be having like brand new planes sitting on the sidelines. That's just a bad place to be because they obviously invest in a new plane. So JetBlue won't have that issue, but they also don't have the oldest fleets. So that's where Delta has that little bit of advantage. Now, JetBlue has been the first company out of all the companies to just kind of have like a greener future, and they will be doing like the carbon neutral domestic flights. So they are the first to do carbon neutral domestic flights. And when it comes to perception, I honestly have to say like JetBlue has really got in front of perception and being in the news and trying to do news friendly things that will, keep them relevant and keep them in people's minds, which I think is really good. And before all this mess happened, right? JetBlue was outperforming all all the other airlines as far as just growth. They were having a great beginning to growth in what their company was doing, and so they were outbeating everybody, and they had like a 6% growth rate coming into the year. So before all this happened, JetBlue was looking to make this was going to be their year, like realistically, this in 2021. So it'll be very interesting to see statistically how they bounce back, or if they continue, if they're still above everybody when it comes to growth. All right, man, you're doing a lot of talking, but I need to hear some statistics. Y'all know I got some statistics for y'all, right? Currently, we're going to look at the PE ratio, the PEG ratio, and the debt to equity ratio. I think these are all very important numbers to look at when you're trying to decide what company you should go with, who has better numbers, who has more debt, who has less debt. These are all important things you want to ask yourself, right? And JetBlue currently has a PE ratio of 397, and Delta has currently a PE ratio of 310. Now, they usually say a low PE ratio is usually not good, and a high PE ratio is usually not good. You usually want to be somewhere in the middle between 11 and 20. I think the industry average before all this mess happened in the airline industry was 18. So clearly everybody's PE ratio is going to be kind of thrown off because there's not much earnings like there was before. Now, the current PEG ratio for JetBlue is 0.23, and the current PEG ratio for Delta is 0.48. Now, the PEG ratio is going to let you know whether it's either overvalued or undervalued. And I'm talking about the stock price. If it's above 1, it's overvalued, if I'm not mistaken. And if it's below 1, it's undervalued. So both of these stocks are definitely undervalued compared to what their earnings were in the past. It'd just be good to see how these turn out, right? So they're both undervalued. One is a little less undervalued than the other, but that could also be because of how much bigger the market cap Delta has. So, I mean, more research for you to look into, right, when you're trying to decide and make these final. If you're getting two companies that have, close numbers, you want to look at the averages of the industry. What is everybody else doing? How is everybody else comparing, right? You want to compare whatever company you're looking to buy to another company in its industry. I think that's the best way to figure out if they're a buy or not. Now, when you're looking at debt to equity ratio, JetBlue has a debt to equity ratio of 0.56, and Delta has a debt to equity ratio of 0.92. And when you look at their like quarter four total liabilities, whew, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Delta was in the 40 billions and JetBlue was in the 7 billions. So for me personally, I want to invest in companies that don't have that much debt. That's a lot of debt. Now, I don't know specifically where that all that debt's coming from. That's definitely a lot of debt, and I really do feel like Delta can be super negatively affected if some of their global equity airlines just don't make it, and some won't make it out of this. There's a lot of airline companies that just won't make it out of this. They'll maybe be bought out, or they'll be in so much debt that they'll be bailed out, and they'll have so much debt because they'll be taking on loans and stuff like that. Um, so it's a good we have a good comparison here because we have two undervalued stocks, and you seem to question like which one will be the best, and in my personal eyes, I think JetBlue will be better off than Delta. After looking at all this information, I really do feel that way, and that's just my thought, right? That's just my thought, my research. Feel free to do your research. Let me know what you think. Which one would you pick after looking at all this data and hearing me talk about it? Which airline industry would you go for? Would you go for JetBlue or would you go for Delta? Or maybe you have another option, right? Let me know in the comments. Make sure y'all hit the thumbs up on this video. Thumbs up on this video because it makes me smile. Y'all want to see me smile, right? Make sure you subscribe if you haven't. Y'all have a great rest of your weekend and just be prepared for more bad news, right?